Thank you very much again for this chance to speak. But just before I do, I'd like to support every word that Amy just said there. In particular, the idea that tiny voices can make change happen. My own little tiny experience was that my accident in a car fire happened to be a week after 2 young men had been injured in exactly the same way, turning over a Land Rover, and the petrol tank cap had come off, gasoline, petrol all over the road, sparks, bang. And I know that their families and my family and others wrote to the manufacturer of that particular form of transport, and things happened. You won't ever find a petrol tank cap that isn't locked now. It's well sealed. Not the case when my accident happened. So, little actions, little words can make a big impact. So, what I want to talk to you about today is challenging attitudes, achieving rights. And I'd like to echo quite a lot of what was said earlier about achieving change in public attitudes. Most of you will have felt the impact of other people's thinking and negative behaviors. We've heard a lot today. And what I always wanted to try to do at some point was to take action on those negative thoughts and opinions and behaviors. And it wasn't until 2008 in Britain that we finally found a way of doing this. We did a survey of public attitudes towards people, slide please, towards people with any form of facial disfigurement. And not surprisingly, the public said, oh no, we treat all people, we treat them all very, very fairly. No, never behave badly towards them. That's what they said when they were asked straight up. And then we did what is called an implicit attitude test. It was invented in Harvard to test people's racial attitudes. And lo and behold, it found that 9 out of 10 people had a negative bias towards somebody with a facial disfigurement. 9 out of 10 members of the public felt uncomfortable. They could not give positive words or characteristics to people with facial disfigurements. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, this is a rather, no, this one. This one. The previous slide on there, please. Yeah, thank you. This is a very full slide, but in 2017, we did a survey of people with facial disfigurements in Britain. 800 plus people responded, and there was some serious news there. Not good news. What it showed was a whole lot of negative activity. 4/5, that's 80% of people, experience comments or unpleasantness from a stranger. I won't go through all of them, but many felt that their condition hindered their career. Many felt that they were vulnerable on public transport. Many had seen a meme or other social media trolling that mocked them or people with their condition. And using dating websites was particularly bad experiences. So we decided to do this test, this implicit attitude test again. And you can, those of you who are scientifically minded will be able to see that the red line is what was found about racial bias in the US. The bias towards people with facial disfigurements was even greater than that. And we thought we've got to start doing something about this. Next slide, please. So we decided to try to figure out what is the problem here. And our view is that people don't realize that they have what I could call implicit biases. I don't know if implicit bias work has become familiar here in Korea, but it's certainly becoming more and more of a familiar subject in Britain. What we tried to point out very early on was the messages that we're all getting, and that includes all you burn survivors here. We've all been conditioned by this visual diet, this daily visual diet. And the first message that this is coming across loud and clear is you've got to look good in order to have success in life. Success in relationships, success at work, success in all sorts of ways. And if you don't look, quote, good, you're going to have a second-rate life. This is rubbish. But it's believed. I believed it. I bet you all believed it. We have to act on it. Next slide, please. The second message, loud and clear, particularly in Britain and the US, probably loud and clear here, is that you can get it fixed. Cosmetic surgery is absolutely brilliant. Let's not get this wrong. Surgery is brilliant, but it has its limits. So this message that all you need to do is get it fixed, and if you don't, you're a bit odd. We have to disabuse this. We have to challenge this prejudice. The third, next slide please. The third message is perhaps even more dangerous than all the other ones. And that is that if you have scars on your face or your body, you are in some way a misfit. You're not a pleasant person to be with. There may be some moral characteristics about you which we want to avoid. Again, there is absolutely no truth in this. These are Hollywood biases. I don't know if you've seen the movie, the one in the middle there. Have any of you seen that? Lord of the Rings? Lord of the Rings is a very famous British book written by a guy called Tolkien. It's a huge book, and in no place does he describe these characters, the orcs, as having scars on their faces. Not once. In fact, in his letters, he says that they have sallow-skinned and are from a Chinese community, actually. They're nasty people, but they do not have facial scars. This is a Hollywood invention, as is Mr. Blofeld here, the Bond movies, and Mr. Freddy Krueger on the left-hand side. None of these are in any way relevant to our lives, but that's the public's diet. That's what they're fed. Next slide, please. So, in our view, we must draw these unconscious facial prejudices to the public's attention, because they lead to some really awful behaviors, to sympathy, to patronizing and low expectations, to ridicule, ostracism, and, sad to say, downright nastiness. So, what we decided to do was to launch a campaign. Next slide, please. Next slide. We decided to launch a campaign called the Campaign for Face Equality, like the campaign for race equality, for face equality. The idea being that everybody, and I mean everybody, should be treated fairly and equally, irrespective of their facial appearance, creating a society in which everyone is valued for the unique contribution they can make. It's a simple concept, and now we've started to turn it into programs. Next slide, please. The Face Equality International, which I'm very proud to lead, is now an alliance of 30 NGOs, charities around the world, of which Phoenix Society and Sunshine Welfare Foundation in Taiwan were founder members. But we are now 30 strong, and we are determined to turn this campaign, which started off as a little idea, into a global movement. The time has come. We can't anymore allow these types of prejudices to go on. We call it facism in the UK, like sexism and racism. It's facism, and we have to put a stop to it. But it won't be quick. It needs sustaining effort in all countries. So I very much hope that you in Korea will come along on this journey. Next slide, please. There are lots of ways in which we've campaigned for face equality, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But suffice to say that different countries need to choose different ways of doing things. I'm just going to run through one or two of these ways in which we've made some progress on a few slides here. Next one, please. So in Britain, we put together, with the help of an advertising agency, a series of posters. And we got them into the public underground, in the London Underground. And they were up for weeks. And a lot of people, millions of people, saw them. They couldn't avoid them. They were there. And these were simple little messages. Have a look at these top ones. They all have the message, and they're from young people. To anyone who looked at me and thought I'd never have the confidence to do anything, look at me now. So these were statements by young people saying, don't write me off. Don't think that I'm a lesser person because I have an unusual face. On the right, I'm afraid you may recognize somebody with a different hairstyle, but it's me. I got the chance to read the news on a TV show. No, you couldn't possibly do that. Oh no, people with facial disfigurement, no, we don't want to see them. All the research we did at that time and afterwards suggested that nobody swithed off. They were quite willing to listen to me, as long as I read the news reasonably well, which was very difficult because you have to read an auto cue, which is very difficult indeed. Next slide, please. More posters. Again, up in all sorts of places. These happen to be in schools and hospitals. That's where they mainly appeared. Next slide, please. We also decided that we would campaign against any media coverage that was negative, that had bad headlines. So this was a particularly nasty headline that we thought we should challenge. And indeed, the newspaper that it appeared in, did take it down and change it. How did we hear about this? because our spies, and I mean our community out there, spotted it. So the Facebook community, in this case it was Facebook, worked. Somebody wrote us in, literally within minutes of this going up, let's campaign against it. And so we sent messages that day straight into this wretched newspaper, this very laudable newspaper, and they changed. They had to change because the pressure was on. Next slide, please. There's also a strong campaign in Britain, and I'm glad to see Phoenix is adopting it, and others will too, to stamp out the use of scars on the villains in movies. I think there's a long way to go, but I think this is starting to pick up some energy now. Next slide, please. In schools and in businesses, we know we've got a huge amount to do. In Britain, that's coming together. There's a book you may have heard of called Wonder, which has certainly become a big thing, a big opening door book in the States and in Britain. I don't know if you're using it here, but it certainly opens up the conversation for 9, 10, 11-year-olds, that sort of age group. So need to look for opportunities to do things like that. Next slide, I'm nearly finished. Very importantly, in Britain, there's a big push at the moment by Changing Faces to get the beauty industry, particularly the brands and the cosmetic industry, to start using people with faces that are unusual. Distinctive, one could call them. So this woman has been advertising a particular, I think it's a clothing business. I'm not going to, anyway, but it's very important that people with distinctive faces are becoming useful and used and seen in unexpected places. Next slide, please. And last but not least, very crucially, the legal protection that people have has to be improved. In Britain, there is anti-discrimination legislation that protects people with disfigurements, but it's not very effective. We will be campaigning at the UN in the next 12 months to ensure that people with disfigurements are covered under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That's a very important development we need to get to happen. Next one, please. And lastly, we are thrilled to have Face Equality Days, and indeed weeks now, and we're just starting to plan the International Face Equality Week in May next year. This is a coming together around the world of all the NGOs and all the supporters and partners of these NGOs to flag up the importance of face equality. Last year was the first big year, and we got some great coverage. But this year, we want to make it even bigger. So again, it will be great if you guys here can get involved with this and make it flying career. Next slide, please. So, my parting shots really are: facism exists, it's largely unwitting, we can self-impose it, we can impose it on ourselves if we're not careful. So please debunk your own brains, but then join the movement. The campaign is designed to challenge negative attitudes, and it's already got some progress, and I hope that you will join it very soon. Thank you very much for listening.
네, 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다. 다시 한번 또 좋은.
Sorry, can I just say, I'm sorry, I brought 2 of these books, one of which I'm going to give to the Halim Burn Foundation, but I'm up for somebody else coming and grabbing it. They might even like to make a donation to the Burn Foundation. It's called Faces of Equality. Okay? Thank you very much.
네, 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.